A man living off welfare in Australia stumbled onto a glitch that let him overdraw his bank account with no limit. Over the next 2.5 years, he withdrew a total of 2.18 million Australian dollars, roughly $2.1 million, blowing it all on luxury cars, yachts, and frequent vacations to Thailand and the Gold Coast. Back in 2010, our story's main character, Luke Moore, came from a working class family, started working as a teenager, and after years of grinding, managed to buy a house. Then a car accident wrecked his life, and the lasting injuries left him completely unable to work, cutting off his income entirely, and this once hardworking, ordinary guy found himself standing in line for government welfare, scraping by on a $449 check every week, crushed under the weight of his mortgage. To keep his bills organized, Luke opened a personal account at Street George Bank and set up automatic payments to cover his mortgage installment every 2 weeks. The account was only supposed to allow small, routine overdrafts, but a bank employee made an error entering it into the system, mistakenly linking this ordinary personal account to relationship manager level approval privileges that retail accounts were never supposed to have. With no approver actually assigned, the system's logic broke down and created a massive bug, meaning no matter how much he overdrew, the automatic payment system would never reject a withdrawal, effectively giving him unlimited overdraft power. Once the account was open, Luke found that his mortgage payments went through fine even when there was no money in the account, and his balance kept sliding further into the negative. Months went by, and Luke kept waiting for the bank to send a collections warning, but nothing ever came. Just a monthly statement that showed up right on schedule, spelling out his mounting debt, interest, and fees in black and white. The bank knew about it the whole time, tracking it month after month, but never once demanded payment, never froze the account, never triggered any risk controls, and that's when Luke realized there was no ceiling on how much he could overdraw. At Christmas in 2010, Luke tested the glitch for the first time, deliberately transferring $4,999 each time, a dollar under the standard $5,000 review threshold, hoping to dodge manual checks, and he repeated it 5 times, with every single overdrawn transaction sailing through the system without a hitch. But one thing never changed. He never lied, never faked any information, never tampered with the system. He used his real name, real address, and real identity every step of the way, going through the bank's official channels. That small distinction would later become the single most expensive detail in the history of Australian banking law. Over the next 2 years, Luke fully sank into this free fantasy of wealth, but he always kept his transactions clean, moving money through legitimate, traceable bank transfers under his own name, with every single withdrawal fully documented and above board. He bought a Maserati, a used Alfa Romeo, an Aston Martin DB7, and even a private yacht for trips to the Gold Coast. Luxury cars worth millions started piling up outside his house, catching everyone's eye, with passersby stopping to stare, old coworkers gossiping and prying, and everyone at the bar wondering how this broke guy living on welfare had suddenly struck it rich. Luke could only shrug it off, telling people he'd been having some good luck with investments lately. The irony was that every other Thursday, the government kept depositing his $449 welfare check like clockwork, straight to a man cruising around in a supercar while sitting on a mountain of debt, the poorest welfare recipient in town somehow living like everyone's envy. Years later, Luke admitted once he started, he simply couldn't stop. Once his debt crossed the $1 million mark, the numbers stopped meaning anything. Negative $800,000 versus negative $900,000 looked exactly the same to him, and the interest piling up in a single month already outpaced an entire year of his welfare income, yet his overdraft privileges kept right on working without a hitch. Then, on August 10, 2012, this 2.5-year dream came crashing down out of nowhere. During what should have been a routine transaction, the system suddenly flashed a rejection. After thousands of no questions asked approvals and $2.1 million in total overdrafts, the silent machine finally said no, and his account was shut down for good. But the reckoning he expected didn't come right away. Months quietly passed, and an eerie calm settled over Luke, who assumed the bank still had no idea what was going on, never realizing the bank had already finished an internal investigation, with staff combing through 29 months of transaction records, locking down every piece of evidence, and handing it straight over to the fraud unit to launch a criminal investigation. The calm was never real, just the quiet before the storm. On December 12, 2012, with no warning and no request for an interview, police broke straight through his door. In the early morning light, a fully armed police team stormed the house, cataloging the luxury cars, the yacht, and the rest of his collection, room by room. Police quickly froze his remaining assets and moved to recover the stolen money, seizing more than $1.1 million on the spot from his accounts, while the rest had already vanished into car depreciation, vacation spending, and partying. Once the case landed with the New South Wales Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, prosecutors charged him with obtaining financial advantage by deception and dealing with proceeds of crime. At his 2015 trial, the prosecution argued in court that this unemployed man had stolen $2.1 million in public funds and blown it all on luxury cars, yachts, drugs, and extravagant living. The defense's argument was blunt, but genuinely turned the case on its head. Every single purchase had been actively authorized by the bank. He'd never faked his identity, never invented a single fact, and in essence, the bank had simply kept lending him money over and over. To the court and the jury at the time, that argument sounded like nothing more than an excuse from a con man, and in the end, the jury found him guilty, sentencing Luke to 4.5 years in prison. Instead of giving up behind bars, Luke buried himself in law books, picking apart his own case file, the indictment, and the criminal code line by line, and he zeroed in on the exact flaw at the heart of his case. A conviction required two core elements: obtaining a financial advantage and some form of deception or false representation. There was no question he'd profited, but there had never been any deception and no false statements anywhere in the process. All 29 months of transactions were tied to his real name and fully traceable. The bank knew everything the whole time and confirmed it in writing month after month, and there's no such thing as deceiving someone who knew everything and kept signing off on it in writing. Armed with this legal argument, Luke, 6 months into his sentence, won a bail hearing at the Supreme Court, walked out of maximum security, and hired one of Sydney's top barristers to file an appeal. In December 2016, the final ruling came down. His original conviction was completely overturned, and the evidence against him was ordered destroyed. The court laid out the core legal principle clearly. Luke's conduct had been deeply dishonest and went against basic decency, but moral dishonesty isn't the same thing as a criminal offense. Luke walked free, and the bank ended up writing off the massive remaining overdraft debt entirely. He'd spent 6 months locked up in a maximum security prison for a crime the law never actually recognized, and he never received a single dollar of official compensation for it. After his release, Luke Moore threw himself into earning a law degree, determined to become a lawyer and help ordinary people fight back against unjust systems. He often points to his own story as a warning to others. Nobody understands better than me what it feels like to be wrongly convicted and locked up for a crime you never committed. But fate wasn't done testing him. In February 2021, Luke called the Sydney police to discuss his case and kept a full recording as evidence, but one officer maliciously falsified the official record, claiming Luke had threatened to kill the detective on the case, landing him back in custody for another 22 days for no reason at all. At the critical moment, his lawyer played the full recording of the call in court, completely clearing his name, and the officer involved was criminally convicted for fabricating evidence. The New South Wales government later issued Luke a formal, written apology. In 2025, a court ordered the state government to pay Luke $450,000 in compensation, The story started with a man broke and living off welfare, and ended with him finally cleared of wrongdoing and officially compensated. That's it for this episode. See you next time.